You want me to click?
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Again, we have a minor technical difficulty. Brad and I were sitting here thinking we were going live, waiting, and there's nobody. So, anyway, we are here. It's a beautiful, cold Saturday morning in Indianapolis. And, Brad, do you know what's in town this weekend in Indiana?
In Indianapolis this weekend, they have the Fanatec World Challenge series that is running at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And so that's a lot. That's touring car, that's GT4, that's GT3. They're also doing a 6 hour or 12-hour endurance race. The SRO basically is running that deal, and so it's a pretty big weekend in Indianapolis. And from what I understand, Carrie, you're ready to make your way to the racetrack for a little racing action this weekend. Isn't
Yes,
that
I
right? You're
am.
going to the Speedway?
Yes, I am. As soon as we finish up with the show, I'm going to be heading to the track with winter gear in hand, and I've been invited to a suite on the main straight, so I'm really excited about that. So I shouldn't get too cold. So that's very exciting. I love World Challenge racing, and it should be a good race. It's an 8-hour race today. Uh, I guess I didn't introduce ourselves. I'm Carrie from Kenny Brown Performance, and this is Brad from
I'm
Kenny Brown.
Brad from Kitty Brown Performance.
For all those of you that are new to us, today our show is we're going to be interviewing, we have a very special guest. It's Brad Grissom. Yes, Brad Grissom. Actually, the reason we're having him is to get to know our team a little bit better. And then also, Brad is very technical on a number of different things. What he's going to talk about today is how to select the correct tire size. And it's very interesting. You'll really enjoy that part of it, and you'll be able to ask him questions afterwards. Also, Kenny's going to share some information on the IRS Cobra. We have so much demand, questions on the IRS Cobra. We thought we'd share a little, it's about 6 minutes long, I think, video of Kenny talking about the IRS Cobra and what he does for that. The other thing we have, Brad, I'm just going to give a little peek to this. We have a trivia question that Brad's going to put out today, and you get to win. The first person that answers wins a $50 gift certificate. That's a $50 Kenny Brown gift certificate. So watch for the trivia question. Looks like we have Brian West with us right now. We have Tim Allen. Hooray. Who else do we have there? I see a Facebook. Greetings, all. Greetings, y'all. If you know who that is, put your name in there so we can see your name. There's more people joining us, so we're happy to have you here. So, Brad, let's get started on Kenny's little video that he's going to share a little bit about IRS Cobras.
Okay, so yeah, IRS Cobra is always a hot topic. It's always a common searched product or range of products on our website, and Kenny's talked a lot about the IRS, his IRS rear suspension, what he does, the changes that he makes in terms of geometry, and he's done a few videos on that. But I found one that was about 7.5 minutes long that I did want to share this morning since it fits the theme, and also wanted to note that Jeff Lucina is the person who is the Facebook user. So it's always good to see Jeff join us. He would be great to have on as a guest for Cars and Coffee. Yeah, for those of you who know Jeff, he's a great guy. He's been a member of our family for years, and he is the general manager at Hastings Motorsports Park. And kudos to him. He's done some great things with that facility and will continue to do so. And now, without further ado, let's play the video on the IRS.
Sounds good. Without further ado, let's play. There it goes. Brad, I don't have any volume.
Hang on just a second here. Let me try it again.
Got it.
Can you hear the volume now?
Sure can.
So what we do is we actually cut the top of cut that off, and we put a bracket on there that bolts directly to the frame rails. So the rear carrier is just absolutely locked into place. And because of that, you don't need to put urethane or solid bushings in the front. It doesn't matter because we lock the back and rock solid. So here's another view of it. And all the things that we do is these upper pickup points are cut off, and these are actually the new ones we make. And the bottom, those are cut off, and we make new ones for that too. So we change both the upper controller mount points and lower controller mount points to get the geometry we're looking for. I mean, I stabilize the roll center. The roll center is just a little bit above the ground, where most race cars are, IRS race cars, and we stabilize the movement of the roll center so it doesn't roll around that much. And we do as much improvement to the camber game as possible within the architecture that we're dealing with. And I also try to add as much anti-squat as possible. It's really hard to get a lot of anti-squat in the IRS car, but we do add extra anti-squat, which not only helps going forward, but anti-squat also helps when the braking keep the back of the car down. Now here's a better picture of the bracket that we put on. Now it used to have just 2 holes for the SN95. However, we're getting so many guys with Fox Mustangs that are putting the IRS in. We've actually changed the bracket with some additional holes so that I'm not going to say they're both every Fox, because Fox Mustangs are the earlier years are kind of a lot different than later years, but this has been modified as a direct bolt up to Fox Mustang. Use the existing threaded bungs that are in the frame rail from the quad shop. So, and then you can see this is our new upper mounting point. This is actually a bracket that's brand new. We cut it, form it, and then weld it on. And here's another view of the bracket, and I mean it's just rock solid. Again, our upper control arms, and then see what else. And here's a picture of the lower control arm bracket, which again, these are all new pieces that we put on. We used to just like grind and do things, and we thought, well, this doesn't look all that nice, and it wasn't real precise. So we just engineered new brackets to put on there. Now Brad kind of threw this in there, and it's kind of like, why you stick that in there? I was going to take it out, but then it made me think, this is actually an illustration that we used for the Motor Week video that we shot of Curry my car down at VIR for Motor Week TV, and we wanted some illustrations, use this illustration, just kind of show the IRS. The thing is that what was also cool about that event, that was the first time we ran the prototype 4.6 FR500 motor with the FR500 heads, cams, and easy to take manifold. So it was kind of a cool thing. So it just made me think this is actually like 20 years ago. So that's how long we've been modifying and building IRS Cobras is like 20 years. There's some other people in the aftermarket have some bits and pieces for them, but nobody really specializes in like we do. And the reason for that is in my early years, I worked on Formula Fords and Formula Atlantic and Super B SCCA road race cars. And they're all IRS independent rear suspension. And also back then in my sports car shop, the Triumph TR6 had an IRS, the Spitfires had an IRS, the 240Zs had an IRS. So IRS was something I had more than casual familiarity with. I'd already been working and changing it for years. So that's why when the IRS came out on the Cobra, I was happy to plan. I knew what to do. And here's the whole system kind of laid out. There's the carrier, and then we've got the lower control arms, and we mount the shock in double shear, so it's really solid. And this is set up for, unfortunately, just set up for a coilover shock with spherical rod ends, because that's what we do in racing, and that's what we do here. So you can't put a factory shock on there, especially one that's been. We see a lot of people take their factory shocks and they put like a spring on it, turn it into a coilover when it wasn't designed for that. And I'm not not a fan of that because the pin on the factory lower control arm was not engineered as a support point to take the full load of spring and shock. It was just engineered as a shock. And it's also in single shear, which I'm not a big fan of. But then you can see again, this is our in phase one is the bracket, the bushings, the rear roll steer kit. And also, I might point out, let me back up a little bit. Okay, it's hard to see here, but what we do when we do the other geometry changes, we modify the inner pickup point for the tie rod. So at that point, we take out all the rear roll steer. So I mean we take with the basic roll steer kit, we take about half of it out, but when we do the geometry change, we take all of it out. Okay. So and then we've got the upper control arm, again, half the weight of factory. And if you take weight out of the suspension, I mean, if you're taking weight out, which makes the suspension react quicker and work better. And I think the whole package, between getting rid of the factory pieces, the big huge springs in the back and going to our coilover, it's something like 45 pounds that we take out of the IRS, which means that if you look at the reality, it's not that much heavier than a live axle. If you take 40 some pounds out of the IRS, it's really close to the weight of a live axle. So that's kind of a big plus. And then we have, of course, our sway bar end links. So that's kind of like the whole package of our IRS and all the geometry changes we make.
Okay. So there you have it. A good quick overview. For those of you who want to know more about the IRS rear suspension, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Cari is planning on doing a one-night IRS Cobra rear suspension workshop, and I don't think she has the dates finalized yet. But
no, I don't. But it's before the
I remember seeing it on the calendar.
Mm-hmm. So we'll be announcing that in the next week or so. But I'm planning on hopefully in the month of November sometime. So it should be a pretty interesting workshop. Kenny gives it. And if you ever want to hear Kenny talk fast, he was trying to get the workshop within an hour and it ended up being 2 hours, but he gave so much information, we may have to replay it. So anyway, before we get started with our special guest today, I would also like to ask everybody, if you like what you're seeing, please give us a thumbs up. Like what we're doing, and also subscribe to our Kenny Brown YouTube channel, and you can push the little bell and you will get notification when we're going live, and also when Brad puts up other videos. We continuously put up different tech videos. If you've never been to the Kenny Brown YouTube channel, you might want to visit that and see what it's all about. So Brad, are you ready?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I'm going to surprise you. Instead of you getting into tech, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about yourself.
Oh, okay.
How's that sound? I always think it's good to get to know the Kenny Brown team. We had a great workshop on the K-Link 2 weeks ago, and we were able to introduce a number of our team members that answered a lot of the tech questions that Kenny normally would have. And it was really nice. So I think we're going to bring them on once in a while and do a little interview. So you're the first one. You're first up, Brad. So, Brad, okay. How did you get started in the industry?
Well, that's funny question. Kenny actually was the first person to get me started in the industry. When I first met Kenny, I believe that was at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and that was somewhere around 1994, maybe. Kenny's shop was still in Omaha, Nebraska. And at the time, I was working for a defense contractor doing engineering work. And I was suffering from the classic government job burnout type of scenario. And so I ran across Kenny at a Mustang event and talked to Cari, and you informed me that you were moving your business to Indianapolis, Indiana, and me being the overzealous person that I was, I threw my hat in the ring, to be one of the first employees, or to at least throw my hat in the ring to get a chance. And for whatever reason, Kenny and Cari decided to give me that chance. And here we are. I guess that was in 1995. So here we are 27 roughly years later, I guess, and I'm still in the industry. And so I spent a lot of time with Kenny in his early days, right after he moved to Indianapolis, a good 10 years, I would say. And he taught me the business of building cars and building parts, and Cari taught me the business of marketing cars and marketing parts. And they mentored me, and I went on to do some other great things. After that, I spent a little time with a tier one manufacturer that did basically chassis and suspension parts for OEM manufacturers. And then I went on to spend a lot of time in the automotive aftermarket electronics, mostly tuning, OBD based tuning, and other types of tuning work. And that's kind of what I still do today on a part-time basis. And I spend the rest of my time helping Cari with the business of Kenny Brown Performance. So that's kind of how I got started and where I am, I guess.
Yes, and Brad, we've done many, many events together. So one event that I remember is the event up in Detroit, the Lights Out trip.
Oh, that was during the infamous Detroit blackout.
Mhm.
That was during Woodward Dream Cruise. So that was quite an adventure. We
How
got to
many
know
of
each other pretty well then.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And how many people were up there for that Dream Cruise? That was very interesting. The good news is we had who was it that was with us that had the big motor coach? We were with somebody with a
Oh,
motor
that
coach.
was, yeah, that was Jim Hodge. Um, Jim, he owned a Kenny Brown Cobra, or a car that he started building his Cobra using Kenny Brown parts, front suspension, rear suspension, and then the car ended up at the shop in Indianapolis. And we went through and did another complete workover of the car, changed some things that maybe had been done wrong, and then we went on to run that car, Mike Judy and I, in the Silver State Classic. And it was a pretty formidable enemy. At that time, that was the first time that a car like that had really been run at the Silver State, although they had run a lot of pretty exotic cars there. But this was by far and away the most complex, most technically advanced IRS Cobra that had ever been run there. But yeah, Jim had a motorhome, and he traveled the country with it, and he towed the car up to Detroit for the Woodward Dream Cruise. And it's a good thing that he had a motorhome with a big generator on it, because when we went to check into the hotel, of course, they had no power. We couldn't check in and we couldn't get our rooms. And Jim, being the smart guy that he was, pulled out all the power cords he had and started running them from the generator through the front door to the front desk and the main office, so that they could get their computer systems up and running, so that they could make key cards for us, so that we could get into our non-air conditioned rooms. And Jim must have thought a lot of Kenny and Cari, because he actually ran a power cord into Kenny and Cari's hotel room through the window and powered their air conditioner up, so that they could sleep comfortably through the night, unlike the rest of us who were sweating our butts off in our hotel rooms, or hanging out at the motor coach, which was the only place that had electricity. And we had another customer of ours. He was a Panther customer, and his name was Bill. I can't remember his last name. And his
Bill Caro.
um,
Is it Bill Caro?
yeah, or maybe I think he was from Maryland, but he and his wife had driven over, and they must have had some foresight into what was going on. I'm not really sure, but they had a car full of sopressata and cheese and all kinds of really fancy meat and cheese products that they had bought from some original Italian deli, which I think is somewhere in the Baltimore area. So that was my first experience with sopressata, which is a great kind of deli meat, snack meat. I'm not sure what they do with it. They use it quite a lot in Italian food. And so I became a sopressata lover. We eventually did find food and water and other forms of beverages at a local, like I'll call it a quickie mart that was kind of across the street from the hotel. And fortunately, we had plenty of cash on us because they had no power at all. And we were able to go through and rummage through all of their food and all of their beverages and loaded up half a pickup truck full of supplies to take back to the hotel. And literally, I think for a day and a half or 2 days, that's what we lived off of, was just stuff that we bought at a convenience store. So
But
that was
we had food, we had fuel, we had some people had air conditioning, and it was a really interesting experience. We'll never forget those days, Brad. So I'm
yeah,
gonna
I
get
don't want to go through that again either.
no, not at all. So Brad, I see that you're wearing a Roush Yates shirt. Can you tell us a little bit about what is your experience with Roush Yates?
Well, Doug Yates has been a friend of mine for a number of years, and his right hand man, Jeff Clark, who's the executive vice president of Roush Yates, is kind of like my brother. We have a really close relationship. I spent a lot of time traveling with him across the NASCAR circuit for 3 or 4 years. I did about 20 races a year, I guess. And I was kind of his roommate as well. He actually had bought the president of Wrangler Jeans fishing shack on Lake Norman. And so when I would go up to Mooresville to spend my 1 week a month working out of the Roush Yates shop, I lived with him. So we became really, really close personal friends, still are today. He taught me a lot about the business of NASCAR, and the company that my day job, as I call it, is for a company called JMS Performance Group. And so JMS Performance Group is a technology partner to Roush Yates. And so we provide them with electronics support and engineering support. We've helped them with lots of different problems that they have. We help them start up their secondary machining business, which operates out of the old Richard Petty stable in Mooresville. And so they manufacture a lot of parts for the military and a lot of other pieces and parts there. But it's been a good relationship. They sort of brought us in when they had their performance parts division, and we helped them develop a whole line of products for Ford vehicles that essentially were simplistic tuning products. And that's how we got started with them. And then we moved on to more advanced things. And they also opened the door for us to start doing work with Roush Industries. And I say Roush Industries, that's Roush Performance as well. And so we're a supplier to Roush Performance on Mustangs and F-150 trucks, and we've helped them with other engineering solutions for supercharger systems and things like that. But our bigger business with Roush is with Roush Industries in their what's called Roush Clean Tech. And so Roush Clean Tech is their alternative fuel business, and they focus primarily on compressed natural gas. And so we help them develop control systems for that type of fuel injection, which is used on municipal buses and school buses. It's also used on Disney rides. We've worked a lot with Roush Entertainment, developing systems and components for theme park rides. and things like that. And that's really the biggest part of Roush's business is not necessarily performance or cars or parts or trucks. The 90% of their business probably is military, municipal, commercial, alternative fuel, theme park, things like that. So pretty well rounded. I'm fortunate that I've learned a lot about a lot of different sort of micro industries that came about through the automotive aftermarket. And it's been a lot of good times with those guys, and still continue to work with them today. So it's fun, it's interesting, and it's always something different.
Yeah, what's interesting about Brad is he started with us in the industry. We've started many people in the industry. It's amazing, and we watch their careers go on, and a lot of them come back. But Brad has come back, and has such a great level of expertise now. He's actually helping with the Speed Therapy Academy, kind of carrying on where Kenny left off. If you're not familiar with the Kenny's Speed Therapy Academy, it's a program where he goes through the basics of building your car, how you build it, what you do, why you would do it, and then he goes into setting it up, tuning it for the track if you're a track person, and then also troubleshooting. And at the very end, he does some driver coaching, virtual driver coaching. It's just a phenomenal program. The people that have been through it have been really, really pleased with it. Brad, I think we're having another one at the beginning of this year. Is that right? So the next Speed Therapy Academy? Okay.
Yeah, so we are going to do another Speed Therapy Academy soon. I don't think we have the dates sorted out yet. Normally, we kind of start it in the October-November range. I think we may try to push it out until after the holidays, just so we can group everything together, do a solid 16 weeks that are sort of uninterrupted. And I'm fortunate enough that I have a original. He went through the first Speed Therapy Academy, Steve Calistini, who some of you know if you've been through the academy as well. He has kind of been molded into my co-host. His background is in aerospace, airplanes for the most part. He's incredibly smart dude, uses all the Kenny Brown products, has a lot of laps under his belt, and so he's really instrumental and has been through helping me in the academy. So we're definitely looking forward to it. We've got some new stuff for the academy. We've got some new master classes for the academy. I'm going to do an even bigger tire and wheel tech section of the academy this year. So we're continuing to grow it. We're continuing to add new educational aspects and resources for those people to use who are graduates. So for those of you who don't know about the academy, you should learn more about it. It's pretty in-depth. It's pretty intense. It gives you all of the information that you need to know from start to finish on building your car, driving your car, maintaining, preparing your car. And so it's just a great program, and I'm always excited to host or co-host the program, and I'm really looking forward to the next one.
So I guess that was a little plug that I wasn't expecting, but that was pretty good, Brad. So we'll be doing a workshop for the Speed Therapy Academy to give you a little taste of it later this year. That will probably be at the beginning of December is what I'm guessing. Okay, so Brad, now we're getting on to the tech part with Brad, but before we do that, we want to remind you, if you're new to the channel, to make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and click the bell so you get notification when we are going live. This is Cars and Coffee with Kenny Brown Show, and we honor Kenny's we share a video of his every session, and then we also have special guests. And today our special guest is Brad Grissom, and he is going to talk a little bit about tire size and how to choose the right tire size for yourself. So Brad, you want to take it away?
Okay, yeah. So we I always seem to get questions about tires and tire sizes, and I think that the reason why is because one thing we didn't discuss earlier is that I spent a lot of time with a company called Pirelli, and I started working with them through the relationship with Kenny Brown. Pirelli, the guys at Pirelli and Kenny got together a long time ago when they really didn't have a strong presence in the Mustang market, and Kenny really kind of helped put the Pirelli name into that marketplace. And I developed a really good relationship with um, some of their middle management, senior management, and some of their engineering people there. And so for 3 or 4 years, I spent a lot of time traveling with Pirelli, primarily in the IMSA series, or at the time it was called the Grand Am series, along with a few other series that they supported. And I learned a lot about tires. I spent a lot of time on pit lane, working with teams to help manage tires and provide them a sort of a technical service. I spent most of my time working with Porsche teams and Ferrari teams back then, which were kind of the teams to beat. They really didn't race Mustangs outside of the Saleen Mustang, but that was never really a competitive car. It was a tire eating machine, is what it was. And so there was no hope for that. And I tried to help them a little bit on that program. But so anyway, long story short, I have a lot of experience with tires, and I do some pretty strange things with tires, and I treat street tires and race tires a lot differently. But the biggest question that we always have is tire size. What can I fit on my car? What works? And there's a lot of tires to choose from. And so I created a chart. Kenny basically started this chart early on, I think, in the academy. And then as time has gone by, I've expanded on this chart a little bit. And I'm going to pull it up here just so you can see it. And I'll explain a little bit about how I use this. And so let me see if I can figure out how to share here. Okay, can everybody see that? Can everyone see this?
Yes, you can see it.
Oh, okay. So I kind of just laid out, this is basically a spreadsheet that I did in Excel, and I list the tire size and the UTQG data. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's kind of a tread wear temperature rating that are assigned for the most part to street tires, or what we might call DOT approved track tires. The rim width range is pretty important. That's something that people don't pay enough attention to. You don't want to put too big of a tire on too small of a wheel, and you really want the tire to set pretty square on the wheel, meaning that the sidewalls are not rolling over, very much. And I'll explain why that is here in just a moment. And then you have the measured rim width, which is basically the width between, or the measurement between the bead seat of the tire itself from the inside to the outside. And so that's normally what this means. And if you do the math, you can calculate a 255 out, which is in millimeters, out to inches, and then the overall diameter. And the overall diameter of the tire is something that I really pay a lot of attention to. I've got these numbers up here. You can see.
Hey, Brad, can you blow that up just a little bit so we can
Yep.
see a little bit more? A little bit
Okay.
more. Good.
Is that better?
Yep, that's good.
Okay. And so I look at, like, for a Fox body Mustang, for instance, since it's at the top, we'll start there. And then I look basically at what size tire they use in the front and what size tire they use in the rear, or I look at the range of tire sizes that they use on those cars. For the Fox body Mustang, they use the same size tire front and rear, which is normal for most OEMs. And then when I'm looking at what we call a plus size tire or increasing the size of the tire, I'm always looking at the diameter to try to match the diameter of whatever plus size tire I'm using so that it as closely matches the factory diameter as possible. That's your general rule of thumb. You could run a much wider tire on the car, but if the aspect ratio is shorter, then the overall diameter of the tire is going to be shorter, and that's not necessarily what you want, because you can lose a little bit of footprint. And footprint or a contact patch on the tire is kind of everything. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So, but what I've done is I've created this chart so it's easy for me to go through and look at what all the different size tires that would be available for that application. And I've chosen them based on the tire diameter so that I can try to as closely match to the factory diameter as possible. Now, occasionally you have to run a slightly shorter tire than what came from the factory if you want to get the extra width out of it, and the aspect ratio is pretty important for that. And so you're always making a compromise with contact patch and with diameter to get the width tire that you want on the car. And sometimes running a wider and we'll say rear tire, for instance, sometimes running a wider rear tire isn't really the best approach if you look at how much footprint you gain or you lose. If you're gaining footprint, that's a great thing. If you're losing footprint just for the sake of having more width, that's not necessarily a good thing. If you look at a 295 35 18, for instance, and then you compare that to a 305 30 18, you're probably going to end up with a shorter diameter, and a shorter diameter tire is going to give you less footprint. And so I've created this chart, and then it's easy for me to go through for say SN95. These are all the different tire choices that we might use or choose for that car. In the old days when we were building SN95s and that was our thing, we ran a 275. I think it was it was a 275 on the front, and we ran a 315 on the rear, but we were running a tire size in the front that was slightly shorter than the factory tire size, and we were running a really wide rear tire on the car, again, just to get as much footprint as we possibly could. But it was really hard to balance those tires out. You constantly want to be looking at how do I keep the same relative tire diameter front and rear without saying going more than a quarter inch over or under what rear tire versus front tire size. And then the same thing for the S197 Mustang. And this is a chart that I can provide to anybody if they want something that's a good cheat sheet to choose from. I also look at what is the best or the closest OEM match for a plus size tire versus the factory size tire. So again, you don't want to get too crazy. I can tell you that in a lot of cases, and this goes back to my days working with Porsche teams, on Porsche 911s, we always ran a much taller rear tire than we did a front tire. And there's a few reasons. Well, there's a couple of different good reasons why you would do that. We have a 2000 Mustang GT that's equipped with Kenny's complete front suspension and Kenny's IRS rear suspension, and that car makes about 650 horsepower at the tires and about 650 foot-pounds of torque. And on that car, we use kind of the Porsche philosophy where we run a much taller, about 1 5/8 inch taller rear tire than we do front tire. And so there's a really good reason for that. And I want to see if anybody in the audience knows, why would I run a much taller rear tire on the car versus the front tire. And so the first person that can tell me why I would want to use a much taller rear tire versus front tire will get a $50 gift certificate.
So let's
And
see your comments in there. I'm going to give you a moment to take a sip of water there, Brad. So if you know the answer, put it in the comments. If you don't know the answer, just guess at it. First person to get it right. And Brian West, you were wondering if you have to get it right or not. Yes, you have to get it right. We'll
yeah,
win that $50 Kenny Brown gift certificate.
yep. And so why would you run a taller rear tire than front tire? Because that seems pretty unorthodox, but there's a valid reason why we do it on our car, and there's a really valid reason why Porsche did it on the 911 as well. And so we'll go on through the chart. S550 Mustang, there's a lot of different tire choices. And then you get into 18-inch and 19-inch tires. And the funny thing about newer Mustangs, well, S197 Mustangs and S550 Mustangs is a lot of times it's hard to get a very close OEM match. Let's say you want to run an 18-inch tire because you want to run like a 200, a 100 tread wear, or maybe you want to run a full slick on it. Well, you're pretty limited in terms of what sizes you can get. With street tires, you're not as limited with a 19-inch wheel. So there's kind of two schools of thought. You run 18-inch wheels if you want to run a dedicated track tire that's say 200, 100, or even a full-blown slick. In our case, that's what we run on our car. But when you get into really good quality 300 and 200 tread wear street tires, a lot of times they don't make an 18-inch tire that has the correct width and diameter, most importantly, diameter for your car. So you're always making compromises in terms of what size tire you can run or what size tire you can get. And so for the S550, there's quite a lot of options. The majority of people are going to run somewhere between a 285 and a 305. But you could run a 315 if you were running, say, a 19-inch wheel. So there's lots of choices there, but you have to be really careful when you're picking what tire you're going to run. Ultimately, whether it's for the street or the track, particularly if you're going up in size a lot, because your options tend to get a lot more limited. And then so for track tires, I kind of list those out separately. Again, I'm paying attention to the width, and I'm paying attention to the diameter. And so this would be three common tire sizes, say, that we would run on an S197 Mustang or an S550 Mustang, or even an SN95 Mustang for that matter. But you can see most of these tires are quite tall. And if another thing, I'll go back. If you look, I keep these numbers here. These are the various different heights of tires. So say for an S197 Mustang, those cars ran anywhere from a 27.3-inch tall front tire to a 27.9-inch tall rear tire. The GT500s ran a taller rear tire, about a half-inch taller than they ran on the front. And again, there's a reason for that. Maybe if somebody knows why an OEM would use a taller rear tire like I use on my race car, chime in. And then we've got the Hoosier race tires, and we've got Pirelli slicks, which is what we run almost exclusively on all of our cars because we have a relationship with Pirelli. We understand the dynamics of those tires, how they work, what pressures that they like. And so, for instance, on our SN95 Mustang, we run a 285 645 18 front, and then we run a 305 680 on the rear. We used to run a 305 690, which was a Porsche tire, but they no longer make that size. But if you look, the difference between the 285 645 and the 305 680, that's roughly 35 millimeters. So it's about roughly an inch and a half, or a little bit, maybe less than an inch and a half taller. And then they've got other sizes that you can run as well, the 315 680 or the 325 680. We had a customer recently with an S550 Mustang. In fact, I think it was a GT350, and he wanted to go to a 325 in the rear, but he was running an 11-inch wheel on the car, and he was bound and determined that he was going to run a 325. But the problem is if you look over here, the measured rim width for a 325 is 12 inches, and the rim range is 11 and a half inches to 12 and a half inches. So if he would have put a 325 on that 11-inch wheel, he would have rolled the sidewalls of the tire over quite a bit, and you'd have to be very careful with rolling the sidewall of a tire over, particularly a street tire, because it will have an impact on your contact patch and how the tire has a natural tendency to want to deform its shape if it's not on the right size wheel. And then we have Michelin's. We have a lot of customers who run Michelin's, and when you look at how they label a Michelin tire, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. For instance, this tire is a Michelin 27 by 68 by 18. And the 27 number means something, but you have to go through a mathematical calculation to figure it out. The most important thing is this number here, which is the 68, and that's basically 680 millimeters tall. And so we're running these tires based on tire diameter just as much or more so than we're running on width. So if you have an S550 Mustang or an S197 Mustang, your common tire size front and rear in a Pirelli Slick is going to be a 305 680 18, but the equivalent tire in a Michelin is a 27 68 18. So again, when you're choosing tires, you need to pay attention to what the numbers actually mean and how the math calculates out. And then we have the Toyo R888 and the BFG, the R1S, which is still a pretty common tire nowadays, or at least you can still get it. And then so down here I have like a simple calculator that I'll use sometimes just if I want to make sure. And when you're looking at tires, always check the specs of the tire from the manufacturer, because a tire that they claim is, or that they label as 305 millimeters might actually be 315 millimeters when you check the actual width of the tire, the cross section width of the tire. So I use this little chart all the time. I basically put in what the width is in millimeters. I put in what the aspect ratio is. If it's a 285/35, I put 0.35 because it's roughly 35% of the width is what the aspect ratio is. And then I put in the wheel size. And then once I enter that data, it basically tells me what the tire height size is. But I took it a step even further, and since we deal primarily with 18-inch wheels and 19-inch wheels, I listed out all of the tire diameter. So everything that's in the 25-inch range, 26-inch range, 27-inch range. And so if you look at all of the different Mustangs, they're running anywhere between a 25 and a 27-inch tall tire. And then I calculated out the tire size, 255/35 18, for instance, equals a 25-inch tall tire by 10-inch wide tire by 18, which is the wheel size. And so this is a great tool that you can use, because if you know that they have a really good tire that's available on a 285/35 18, then you can just basically look at the math calculations and say, okay, that tire is 25.9 inches tall, 11.2 inches wide. That's going to fit perfect on my wheel. And it's the right diameter, or it's close to the right diameter, versus a 295/30 18, which you might think is going to have a much bigger footprint. But then when you do the math, you lose almost an inch of diameter, and you only gain less than a half of an inch of width. And then we do the same thing for 19-inch wheels as well. We have the 25, 26, and 27-inch diameter. And so this chart's pretty handy. I've sent it to several people who are looking at different tire sizes for their cars, and this is just kind of a cheat sheet that we use internally and that our customers will use when they're out searching the Tire Rack website or some of the other website, and they're trying to figure out what size tire fits on their car, and then all of a sudden they have 15 different options to choose from, and things get really confusing from there. So I'm going to stop sharing this. Can everybody see me now? Okay. And then, and yes, schedule a 15-minute one-on-one consultation. If you ever have questions about tires, or you can't wrap your mind around it, and you want someone to basically just go through the process, give you what your limited options are going to be, and then help you make a good educated guess. We work with customers all the time on tire sizes and on wheel sizes, particularly if they're having us build, say, a custom forge line wheel for them. Then it gives us a lot of options to really maximize the tire size itself versus something that maybe is a cookie cutter, and you can't, an Apex wheel, for instance, you can buy them in 18 by 10, 19 by 10, 18 by 11, 19 by 11, but you're pretty well stuck with what the back space or the offset of the wheel is going to be, what the width of the wheel is going to be, and then you fit yourself into a pretty narrow window in terms of what tire you're going to use. If you had an S550 Mustang, well, you could technically, if you had the right massaging of the fender skills, you could easily run a 325 millimeter tire on that, but then you are forced into buying a custom wheel for that, because nobody makes an off-the-shelf 12-inch wheel that'll just bolt right on the car. So then there's a lot of math that has to be done there. And
so I've got we can schedule a 15-minute with Brad, and he'll help you solve all these questions.
Yeah, you just call me. So there's one more thing, and I'm going to wrap this up, Cari. I promise. There's one more thing I wanted to show real quick.
Let me get rid of this if I can find it.
Oh no, you're fine. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
This is something that I'm working on ultimately as part of the academy. Can everybody see this? So we're talking about contact patch. We're talking about the amount of the tire it is physically, or the amount of rubber that's physically meeting the road itself. And so this is kind of a good representation of how much rubber is actually on the road. And I'll move on to another slide here. There's only 3 slides, but if you look right here, you'll see that basically is representative of the tire's contact patch. So we talk about footprint, and we talk about contact patch, and it basically is the amount of rubber that's physically on the road. And so, and in fact, I already have somebody emailing me for this chart. But so this is when we talk about contact patch, this is what we're talking about, is how much of that tire is physically on the road. Now, as you go with a shorter diameter tire, this footprint is going to get smaller. It's going to go in. As you go with a bigger diameter tire, you're going to get a much bigger footprint, and the bigger the footprint, the more the traction that you're going to have, whether it's traction under braking or whether it's traction under acceleration. If you have a high horsepower car, you're probably going to be looking to maximize that footprint as much as you possibly can, particularly at the rear of the car, because a front engine car versus a rear engine car, the footprint is going to be different. And I'll show you this next slide. If you look right here, this is the front of the car, okay? And these are the front tires. And so if you look at the size of the footprint for the front tire, because they're weight biased toward the front, Mustangs are, it's going to be a lot bigger than the footprint of the rear tire. And this would be using the same size tire front and rear. So this is what your contact patch is going to look like on a front engine rear drive car. And you can notice you have a lot more footprint at the front than you have at the rear, and that's because there's more weight on the front tire. So it's forcing the tire's contact patch to be much larger than the rear of the car. And this is pretty important. And that's, again, is a lot of times why people will run a taller rear tire, is to try to match that footprint front and rear. Although there's some other reasons why you would run a taller rear tire as well. And this is the last slide. And so we talked about putting too big of a tire on too small of a wheel. And if you look at this diagram up here, that's sort of representative of what a street tire would look like when it's on a on a common wheel. You're going to have about this much roll, or this represents the amount of sidewall roll that you have on the tire. And you can see that the tire fits pretty flat, or sits pretty flat on the ground. And so this is a street tire. If this were a slick and I was using it on my car, this bulge, you wouldn't see it. It would be more or less pretty straight. And you want, when you're putting a tire on a wheel, you want the tire to sit as square on the wheel as possible. The less bulge you have, the better off you're going to be, and the more responsive the tire is going to be. If you put a tire that's too wide for your wheel on the car, you're going to get a lot of bulge. But the biggest thing is what you see right here. You see the surface of the tire where it meets the road, because the tire is bulging so much, it inherently wants to pull the contact patch up. So you're not getting as big a footprint or as good a footprint on the surface of the track itself. So the biggest rule of thumb is never put too big of a tire on there, because you'll end up distorting the surface of the tire as well. And you'll really have to play with pressures a lot, or you'll never get the pressures right, or the tire temperatures right, because you have this extreme deformation of the tire itself. And so that's just kind of the quick down and dirty, what the do's and the don'ts are.
In the Speed Therapy Academy, you also teach the proper way to take and read tire temperatures. So that's so important when you're on track or racing.
Yeah, the Speed Therapy Academy program, when we talk about tires, we're not just talking about sizes and diameters. We get really in depth into tire footprint, and we talk about slip angles, and we talk about and show diagrams of what's actually happening to the tire under braking and under acceleration, and how the tire reacts to those different levels of forces, and why you can lose grip in certain situations on the track. We get in depth about tire manufacturing. We get in depth about wheel manufacturing. We have Steve Sharp from Forge Line come in and talk a lot about wheels and how the wheel directly impacts the tire itself. So for those of you who are joining us today that are Academy alumni, you know a lot about this. And fortunately, everybody who goes through the Academy continues to be part of that group. And as we do our next Academy the following year, or 6 months later, all of those people are invited and privileged to join in on the Academy, so they can see what the new information is, how the Academy is evolving. And the master classes that we do on the various different subjects are always beneficial to those people. So once you go through the Academy the first time, you're going through it again and again. And we've got people who've gone through the Academy 3 times that were original alumni members, and every time they learn something new, or they get to see a new master class that wasn't available before. And so it's just a great program, because it's once you're in, and then you're always have that opportunity to continue.
You're part of the club. We have a monthly Speed Therapy Academy alumni meeting on the first Wednesday of every month, which is really fun to get everybody together for that. Well, Brad, thank you. That was a lot of information. And again, we will be doing the Speed Therapy Academy in the right after the first of the year. We have a few questions, Brad. So
okay. Yep. Yeah. Do you want to read the questions?
Yeah, I can read the questions, and we have a couple comments as well. Let me find them here. So on Kenny's program, Tim Allen said that sure was an impressive piece, very complex. Brian West said this thing is so sweet. I wish I still had my Iris Cobra. Oh, Brian, you tell us that all the time. Maybe we should get you another one. So, and then also, I think there was another, Tim Allen asked a question on the IRS. He said, talking about weight, if you're looking at converting a live axle to a KD IRS full kit or using a stock live axle and adding a K-link, do they weigh in about the same? So that's comparing the IRS to the K-link.
And so the answer to that question is yes. They do weigh about the same. The K-link is not a heavy product by any stretch of the imagination. It may look sizable, but it's designed to be fairly lightweight. And with all the weight that we take out of the independent rear suspension that we do for, say, Fox Body and SN95 cars, by the time we're done cutting and trimming and refining the carrier as well as the control arms and other components, you end up really with about the same weight as you do with a live axle car. And so on our 2000 Mustang, we converted from a live axle, which had a Watts link at the time, and we converted to Kenny's IRS rear suspension. And when you're driving the car, you don't notice the difference in weight at all because there really is no difference in weight. We're talking about a few pounds plus or minus one versus the other. So that's the great thing about what Kenny does with the IRS is he takes a lot of weight out. And then at the end of the day, you end up with something that performs much better than a live axle car, but technically weighs about the same. So, Tim, I guess there's the short answer to your question.
So, and I think it's time to figure out who wins the $50 gift certificate, Kenny Brown gift certificate. We have 3 people that responded. Brian West said more forward bite. I have something that's called Facebook user. If you know who you are, all we see is Facebook user because of the application we use. So if you can type your name in the comments again, so we know who you are. They answered greater rear footprint to help with the weight of the engine in the back. And then Rory also said lower tire pressure would also increase. Oh, that's a question I think yes. Contact patch, would it not?
Not necessarily, no. If you're running a tire that is too low on pressure, then more than likely the center section of the tire is not going to be making as good a contact with the track surface as the outer edges of the tire are. And that's why pressure, well, first off, that's why you take tire temperatures. Is the center of the tire a lower temperature than the inside and outside edges of the tire? If it is, then the tire is underinflated, and you know that the tire is not making as good a contact patch with the track surface as what would be considered optimal for that. So no, a lower tire pressure would not increase your contact patch. It could actually decrease your contact patch. And the same thing with the tire if it's overinflated. It's going to have a much higher temperature in the center of the tire than it is on the outside or the inside edge of the tire, because the tire is kind of round where it's meeting the surface of the track itself. And again, you don't want that either. And that's why temperature is so critical to pressure. Is you need to know if the pressure is lower in the middle or it's higher in the middle, then you know that you need to either increase tire pressure or you need to decrease tire pressure. And the general rule of thumb for us when we go on track is to slightly overinflate the tire so that when we bring the car in after 6 or 8 or 10 laps, if we're engineering the tire based on pressure, we can bleed the pressure down, which is easier than adding air or nitrogen after the fact. And then we look at the tire temperatures themselves. And if we're running a slick and the tire is overinflated, we should be able to look at the temperatures and it should tell us right away and confirm that, yes, in fact, the tire is overinflated. Race tires are incredibly pressure sensitive. So you run them at the pressure that the manufacturer wants. And then tire temperature kind of becomes a secondary tool that you use to fine tune the car itself. If you're running a street tire, tire temperature may take a little bit of precedence over the tire pressure itself, because you don't really know what the hot operating optimal pressure for a street tire is. So you're using temperature to figure out what works best on your car. On real race tires, it's completely the exact opposite. So, and I work with people all the time on little things like that. And so, so far, I don't see anybody who's actually gotten the question correct.
Okay, well, actually, why don't you, Rory's asking what is the question? What was the question that they're supposed to answer for the $50
Okay,
gift?
so the question is, on a Porsche 911, for instance, or for Brad's road race car, for instance, we run a quite a bit taller tire in the rear of the car than we do in the front of the car. And the tire that we run in the front of the car is almost the identical tire height or diameter as the factory tire. But that car makes 650 horsepower and 650 foot-pounds of torque, and it's pretty lightweight. And so we run a much taller tire on the rear of the car, and there's a pretty good reason why we do that, and it's related to horsepower and it's related to contact patch.
Okay, so the Facebook uses a greater rear footprint to help with the weight of the engine in the back. That's not the correct answer?
No.
Okay. More
And the
for
reason why I did this is I figured no one would get the answer. So you have to work hard to earn that $50 gift certificate.
Okay, well, we're going to give away $50 gift certificates. So
And
Brian,
we have Dylan, or we have Brian, I guess.
yeah, Brian West was the first one. So Brian, you win the $50 gift certificate. How's that sound? Nobody's a loser here.
And then Dylan said, is it to use the sidewall to your advantage? You could use an extra sidewall as a suspension component and help with turn-in. And so that's a good response. And there's a lot of truth to what he's saying there. That's not necessarily the reason why we run a rear tire, but it's a very good thought. And Dylan's been through the academy, so he knows a lot about this. Rory says tire sizing gets even more scary when dealing with all-wheel drive. Yes, that's absolutely a fact. And with all-wheel drive cars, you need to have the tire diameter matched in the front and the rear. Despite the fact that it's slightly more biased toward the rear on those cars in terms of power output, but tire diameter is pretty sensitive on those cars. And let's see here.
And so we have at the bottom.
We have Tim Allen. He just says that he was on a call, so he missed part of this. Jorge says it keeps the horsepower rating the same. Tim Allen says a taller tire will allow more clutching. Oh, and the first person that actually got the question correct is Greg Drake. And so,
really? Okay.
And so his response was traction on exit, and so that is the correct answer, and I'll explain that a little bit. We ran the same size tire front and rear, same size tire, same diameter tire on front and rear on the car, and the front of the car had great grip, but at corner exit, when we would lay into 650 horsepower, we could just not get the tires to stick. It was too much tire for a 285, 645, 18. And so I started thinking, how am I going to get more grip in the rear? Because there's not a lot that I can do from a mechanical standpoint on the rear suspension to induce more rear grip. And I remembered back in my Porsche days, there's a specific reason why we always ran 1.5 to 2 inch taller rear tire on a Porsche 911, and that's because those cars made 450, 500 horsepower, whatever it was, and they were always traction limited at the rear. And Porsche as an OEM, as well as other companies, Lamborghini, Ferrari, you'll see a lot of those manufacturers run quite a bit taller rear tire than they do front tire. And the primary reason why they do that is to get a bigger footprint so they can get more traction. And when we went from a 645 diameter front and rear tire to a 645 front and a 690 or a 680 rear, that extra tire diameter gave us enough extra footprint to actually put the tire to the ground without spinning the rear tires, essentially. So the number one reason why we run a taller rear tire is traction. If you're running, a lower horsepower car, that's not important at all. Doesn't matter. You won't need it. But if you're running a supercharged car that's laying down a ton of power and a ton of torque, there is going to be a lot of advantage to running a taller rear tire. It definitely will help manage the traction. So kudos to Greg, who is an alumni member as well, for cluing in on
So
that.
Brian is kind enough, he said, give Greg the prize, but Brian, I think we're going to give both you and Greg the $50 certificate. Not each of you have one, not that you split it. So each of you get a $50 Penny Brown gift certificate. So we'll make sure we get that to you. So good job.
And then so Tim Allen did have a clutching effect over a low profile where the tire will not absorb the torque energy. So torque energy on the tire is like a real thing, under braking or under acceleration, and it affects a different part of the tire itself, whether it's the leading edge or the trailing edge of the tire. The leading edge can be your friend under braking, but it's not necessarily your friend under hard acceleration because all the force is at the trailing edge of the tire itself. So that was good. And then Tim Allen also said lower profile will be more likely to spin under high demand. And so, yes, that's true, because a lower profile tire, depending upon the width, is going to have less footprint. So you're going to have less traction. Okay, and that looks like it for the questions and the comments that we had. So kudos to Greg Drake. You're paying attention.
So I guess this ends the episode then. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us today for the hour. And I don't know if you see Kenny's hands reaching out. He's right on my shoulder here. He keeps touching my shoulder. It's because
He's giving you a pat on the back for doing such a great job, Cari.
I can't make it happen right now, but he's been reaching out to me. Anyway, we are going to be we're really close. People have been wanting to get a transmission person on, expert, and we're really close because it's the end of the season and people's schedules are now freeing up a little bit. So hopefully in 2 weeks, we'll have a transmission person on. So next week, Kenny will be sharing one of his encore presentations in a replay. And then Brad and I will be back on in 2 weeks. So we look forward to seeing you then. Take care. And again, thanks for joining us.
Okay, everybody have a great weekend.